Hello everyone, it's Hoplite Mike. I hope you're all doing well. Today we are back with Lord of the Rings Total War Remastered, and we're doing a faction guide and overview for Gundabad. This is one of my favourite factions to play because you get to reclaim the old lands of Angmar, and it's also the only faction where you get the Black Númenórean units. So without further ado, I will cover the general and unique units, how the economy works, how recruitment works, campaign strategy, and finally a full showcase of the unit roster on the battlefield. I'll start with generals and unique characters. If we go to the family tree, we will see there are two generals, Gorzag the faction leader and Ulfgaz the faction heir. Gorzag can be found in Gundabad. He has a unique general's bodyguard, being the Fallen, which are a Black Númenórean cavalry unit. As cavalry units go, this is one of the best in the game, and because it's a general's unit, it is auto-replenishing. So as an overall package, I would say this is one of the strongest generals in the mod. Just to note, the generic general's bodyguard for Gundabad is an Orc champions unit. It's not the Fallen. So once Gorzag dies, this Fallen unit will go with him, and you won't get it back. So you want to use it because it's your strongest general, but try not to lose him needlessly. Moving over to Khondum, we've got Ulfgaz. He has the aforementioned Orc champions unit as his bodyguard, which is the generic general's bodyguard for Gundabad. So every general that spawns in after the start of the campaign will have this Orc champions unit. Its overall power level is not that high. Like with a lot of the Orc and Goblin factions, their strength comes from their sheer numbers rather than the inherent power. It doesn't have any plus hit points like a lot of the good factions general's bodyguards do, and its stats are probably comparable to a mid-tier unit from a faction like Gondor or Dale, but obviously its unit size of 124 is massive. That's about double the size of a good faction's general's bodyguard. But overall, they'll still be able to do a job. If you get 4 or 5 into an army, they'll still be able to hold the line. In terms of the models themselves, all your generals have the same model. So I will pull Gorzag out of Gundabad. The model itself is very similar just to an Orc model. In this section, I'm going to run through how the economy works. So for the Orc and Goblin factions, it is slightly different. You don't have access to the farms, roads, ports, or traders, like a lot of the other factions do. Your two primary economy buildings are the mines and the slavery. The mines just giving you some additional mining income, and then the slavery increasing your trade income. Additionally, it provides more farmland in regions that have hidden resource farm, increasing your farming income. It therefore acts as a farm building equivalent when playing as the evil factions. However, when playing as Gundabad, I think the best strategy for making money or increasing your income is by taking advantage of the various tax bonuses. So if we go back to the building tree, we will see that the Orc spawning pits give you population growth. The Forge building line will give you a tax income bonus. And then additionally, every region that is in the realm of Angmar, which is denoted by this card here, will get an additional tax income bonus of 10%, and further population growth of 1%. So when you combine the multiple tax income bonuses from the realm of Angmar and the Forge, and then the population growth from the spawning pit, you can make a massive amount of income through taxes alone. And you can see that when we click on the settlement income breakdown tab for Gundabad. Almost all the income here is coming from taxes. So I would say a good economic strategy in the early game is just to conquer every region which is in the realm of Angmar. And there are 8 settlements in the realm of Angmar, or that have this card here. That is Gundabad, Durkanda, Ugalai, Litash, Ravda, Shedun, Morkai, and Karndum. So every settlement I just mentioned there does have this Angmar card and will give you that tax income bonus. So once you've got all those regions, you'll be able to make a very steady and robust income. After you have established the realm of Angmar, you should have a decent tax income coming in. And I'd say the next best investment after that would be in the mine building tree. So being in the mountains, there are various close settlements where you can build mines, and usually that's where you can see the ore on the map. So for example, in Gundabad we can build mines, in Karndum we can build mines, and it's likewise for Shedun and Gram. So between the tax income and the mining income, I'd say you'll be able to make a lot of money, which will be able to support you through most of the campaign. Once you expand past the realm of Angmar and start heading south and west, those regions will no longer have the realm of Angmar building card. So those regions won't get the tax income bonus or the population growth bonus. However, a lot of the regions to the south and west have hidden resource farm, and Bree is one such example. So you don't start with Bree, I've just taken it for the purposes of this video. But we can see, if we look at the slavery building line in this location, it does give you the increased farmland, which will allow you to increase your farming income, which we can see here. So that's just something to note, that as you transition out of the realm of Angmar, you won't be able to generate as high tax income from these regions. However, you will be able to generate higher farming income because the regions out with the realm of Angmar, or there's a lot more regions out with the realm of Angmar that have hidden resource farm. And then the other thing as well, which I thought was quite important, is that because of the play style of the Orc and Goblin factions, where you just recruit loads and loads of units, they will be recruited directly from the population pool of that particular region. And because when you're playing as the Orcs or Goblins, you recruit so many units, if you're just constantly spamming units, it's going to have a very detrimental effect on the level of population, and it can hamper you trying to get to the higher tiers of settlement. So if you are recruiting loads of units, which will more than likely happen because it's a Goblin or Orc faction, that's going to make it more difficult to get to the higher tiers of buildings. So you can always select certain regions that you actually want to recruit from, and then leave others to build up to the higher tiers. And particularly in those regions where you can build mines, you want to get the population to 6,000 as soon as possible, to allow you to get the highest tier of mines, being tier 3. So recruiting loads of units from that particular region will hamper your ability to get to tier 3 for that settlement. In this section, I'm going to run through how recruitment works. Like with most factions, there are 2 core buildings which gives you access to most of your roster, being the spawning pits and the forge. The warg pen gives you access to the warg riders. The troll pen gives you access to the troll units. And lastly, every settlement that is in the realm of Angmar gives you access to the Black Numenorians, assuming you have certain buildings in place already. So that's a quick rundown of the buildings. I'm now going to speak about them in greater detail. The spawning pit is the most basic of recruitment buildings. That gives you access to some of your Orc and Goblin units. There are no restrictions on this building, you can build it absolutely anywhere. And there are actually 4 tiers, but we can only see 3 here because there are 2 tiers at the large town level. So the lesser Orc spawning pit would fit between the Snagger and the Orc spawning pit. There's not too much to say about this building. It does give you population growth, which is very important when playing as the orcs and the goblins, because the level of recruitment can decimate the population levels in your settlements without a good level of population growth, so it's important to get to the higher tiers of that. Next we have the Mordor Forge. There are actually 3 tiers of the Mordor Forge, but the 3rd tier can only be built in regions that have Hidden Resource Orc, which is generally just the regions in and around Mordor. So it's not really something that Gundabad have access to, but that's not much of a disadvantage because the 3rd tier of the Forge doesn't grant Gundabad access to any more units. The Forge just gives you access to some more of the Orc and Goblin units. Importantly, it gives you your only Arch unit. The tax income bonus is also appreciated. So next we have the Warg Pen. You can only build the Warg Pen in regions which have the Warg resource. So they do actually appear on the map. For example, in Gundabad, you can see the Wargs as a resource there. Latash is another region which has the Wargs resource. Currently, there are only 5 regions in the game which have the Wargs resource, being the 2 we just looked at, Kidrol Sin, Isengard, and then another settlement to the west here. I know the developers are adding in additional resources, so when you come to play it, there might be some more regions where you can get the Warg Riders. Up next we have the Troll Pens. So to be able to build the Troll Caves and the large Troll Caves, that region needs to have Hidden Resource Troll. Because it's a hidden resource, you can't see it on the campaign map, but there are actually quite a lot of regions which have it. For example, Gundabad, Latash, and Gram all have hidden resource trolls, so you'll be able to build the troll pens there and get access to those troll units. The trolls are incredibly powerful in this mod. If you can avoid the archer fire and get to the front line, they can pick up hundreds of kills, so that's definitely something that's worth prioritizing. Then the last building we covered was the Realm of Angmar building card, which allows you to recruit the Black Numenorian units. In order to recruit the Black Numenorian Vanguards, the infantry units, you just need tier 3 of the spawning pit. So that's not really a problem because you can get that from tier 2 of a settlement because there's 2 tiers of the spawning pit at the 2nd level. The Fallen, which is the Black Numenorian Cavalry unit, does require a greater Warg Pen, which means it's restricted to those regions that have the Warg resource, so there's not many regions where you'll be able to get them. But the Black Numenorians are some of the strongest units in the game, so it's definitely something you want to go for if you're playing as Gundabad. They do take 4 turns to recruit, but that's because the stats are so strong. So that's all the buildings and the restrictions. Like with most factions, you've got your upgrade buildings, the practice fields, rangers, blacksmiths, and the training grounds. That is quite important when playing as Gundabad because the orc and goblin units are not inherently powerful. Their strength just comes from the sheer numbers. So getting the upgrade buildings can be quite useful, particularly the light and heavy attack as well as the armor. That will give you a better chance against some of your enemies. So I think that's probably about it for the recruitment section. So now I'm going to move on to campaign strategy. In this section, I'm going to discuss campaign strategy. So I know from speaking to one of the developers that they are looking at changing the victory conditions. So this strategy is more going to focus on getting set up, because I think once you get set up, you can sort of do whatever you want anyway. The first thing I would recommend doing is establishing the Realm of Angmar. There are 8 regions in Angmar, being Gundabad, Durkundur, Uglai, Latash, Ravda, Shedon, Morkai, and Kharndum. Every settlement in the realm of Angmar will have the Angmar building card here, and that gives you a tax income bonus of 10% and population growth of 1% per turn. So when you combine the bonuses of the realm of Angmar with the population growth of the spawning pit and the additional tax income bonus of the forge, that will really allow you to grow your tax income and fund you through the early to mid game. So establishing the realm of Angmar is very important in terms of getting your economy going and increasing your tax income, because that is the primary revenue stream for Gundabad. I would just note that some of the rebel regions in Angmar do have very large garrisons, such as Uglai, and I think there are some cave trolls in here as well. So I found it best to build up a decent army before going for them. Something worth noting as well is that you can go through the mountains via this pass here. You don't need to walk all the way around. After you've got the Realm of Angmar set up, the next best investment is the mines. So being in the mountains, there are various regions where you can build mines, and that is donated by the ore resource, such as here in Gundabad. Likewise with Kharndum, and also in Gram. You can build mines in Shedon, but it doesn't have the same level of resource, it's only tier 1. Mines are one of the most lucrative building lines in this mod, so between the tax income and the mining income, that should be able to fund you through most of the campaign. Just bear in mind that Gundabad has access to 3 tiers of the mine, so the highest tier requires the settlement to be a minor city, which then requires 6,000 people. So if you are recruiting loads of units out of a particular settlement, that will hamper your ability to get to the higher tiers of settlement. So in the regions where you can get those mines, I would recommend restricting your recruitment to allow the population growth or the population level to get to 6,000 so you can get the highest tier of mines. In terms of strategic direction, once you have the Realm of Angmar set up, the Free Peoples faction are quite an easy target just because their units are not very powerful. So in the early game, when you've got your weaker Orc and Goblin units, they are quite a good target to go for because you have similar power levels. As you move further into the campaign and you've got more of an infrastructure set up, you might have access to your stronger units like the Black Numenorian units from the Realm of Angmar, the Wargs from Latash or Gundabad, and then the Trolls from a number of regions in the mountains. It's at that point when you can start going after the stronger factions, such as the Elves of Noldor and the Dwarves of Ered Luin. Erebor does seem to expand into the north and west as well, so you probably need to deal with them at some point. You definitely need your stronger units for that, but the Trolls in particular are very strong. If you can keep them away from Archer Fire, they can just run through enemy lines and pick up hundreds of kills. Something else to bear in mind then is your allies. So you start next to the Orc Rabbles, which are the Goblin faction. They are set up along the Misty Mountains. I'm not sure what it is about the AI, but they don't seem to be able to handle the Goblins very well. And I think it's just because the Goblins can generate armies so quickly and start taking rebel regions. So the Orc Rabbles and the Goblins are actually a very valuable ally to have because they'll start spilling out of the mountains and taking these rebel regions. And in a lot of cases, they will actually surround Rivendell. So just bear in mind that you've got them to the south, and actually because you have no one to the north, so your northern border is secure, and your southern border is also fairly secure, it means you've got a free run at the Free Peoples faction. The Dunlendings also tend to expand north as well, so just bear in mind you've got another ally there. And yeah, I think that's probably about it for the campaign strategy. It is a very fun campaign just because you've got the weaker orc and goblin units in the early game, and then you transition to your stronger black Numenorian units, which are a lot of fun to play with. But yeah, having run through all that, I'm now going to move on to the showcase of the unit roster. In this section, I'm going to do a full showcase of the unit roster on the battlefield. The Gundabad roster is quite an interesting one because they have the weak early game orc and goblin units, but then they transition to some very powerful late game units, being the black Numenorians and the trolls. So those are the ones I'm going to focus on for the purposes of this roster review. So first we have the Orc Snagger unit, which comes from tier 1 of the spawning pits. They have very weak stats. They're comparable to a peasant unit from the base game. I wouldn't use them unless I had no other option, and there are some better options from tier 1 of the spawning pits. So now I'll move on to the next unit. Then we have the first goblin unit, the Raider Goblins. They are still very weak overall, but like with most of the orc and goblin units, their strength just comes from the sheer numbers rather than their inherent power. Their weapon does have armor piercing, which does give them a selling point over some of the orc units. Then we have the Lesser Orc Warband from tier 2 of the spawning pits. They are significantly better than the Orc Snagger and the first orc unit that is worth recruiting, especially because the Snagger take 2 turns to recruit, which is an outlier as most of the orc and goblin units only take 1 turn to obtain. The defense of 10 and attack of 3 is usable when combined with the massive unit size. The upkeep is very low as it is for most of the orc units, so that isn't anything to worry about. Then we come on to the Lesser Orc Spearmen, also recruitable from tier 2 of the spawning pits. Their stats are very similar to the Lesser Orc Warband. They just have +1 defense and -1 attack. But again, these are a unit that I use quite a lot in my campaigns. Then we have the upgraded goblin units, the Armored Goblins. Again, they have very similar stats to the Lesser Orc Warband and Spearmen. The main difference is the armor piercing primary weapon, which is useful against certain factions like the dwarves. As orc and goblin units go, this is probably one of the best. Then we have the third goblin unit of the roster, the Slayer Goblins. The main strengths of this unit are the relatively high melee attack of 4, which is more than anything we've seen up to this point. Combined with the armor piercing primary weapon and high charge stat of 6, they have a lot of offensive power. However, the defense is low and they won't last long in a fight. Then we have the Troll Handlers, which are more of an add-on unit for the Troll Pen building line. In terms of Spearmen, we have seen a better one already in the Lesser Orc Spearmen, so this is the one I tend to go for instead of the Troll Handlers. So now we move on to the ranged unit, the first of which is the Orc Archers. This is your only arch unit. As archer units go, this is obviously very weak, but like with all the orc and goblin units, their strength comes from the size of the unit. The missile attack of 10 is on the lower end, as is the range of 110. They actually have decent ammo per soldier at 20 and a decent unit size, meaning that overall the ammo level is pretty high. The defense and melee attack is very low, so I wouldn't be expecting much out of them in melee combat, but there are certain situations where the archers will be useful, so just bear in mind that you can recruit those. The second ranged unit are the Orc Scouts, which are a skirmish unit. They have a slightly improved missile attack of 12, but then the range is much reduced to reflect the fact that they are a skirmish unit. It's not a unit I've really used much. I usually go for the arch unit if I'm looking for range units, but they are there to use if you want them. Next, we move on to the black Numenorian units, which are some of my favourite in this mod. You can recruit these from a region which has the Realm of Angmar building card, as long as you have the tier 3 of the spawning pits, and they do take 4 turns to recruit, so it takes a while to get them. But these are some of the best infantry in the game. The melee attack of 12 is virtually unmatched, I can only think of one unit which has melee attack that's as high as that, but most elite tier units have melee attack of between 8 and 10, so this is definitely a step above that. The defense of 20 is a bit on the lower end, but I guess that's to offset the high attack, and then the charge stat of 8 is also very good, so if you get a good charge off with these, then you'd expect that to do a lot of damage. The unit size of 80 is on the lower end for melee infantry. Usually that ranges from about 100 to 140, but again, I think that's just to offset their power level. But these are probably the jewel in the crown for the Gundabad roster, and one of the reasons why I enjoy playing them so much. It does give you a chance against the stronger factions like the elves and the dwarves, so I usually try and rush the tier 3 spawning pits to be able to recruit these from Gundabad as soon as possible. Up next we have the Black Númenórean Cavalry unit, the Fallen. You can only get these from regions that have the Realm of Angmar card, and additionally you need that settlement to have the second tier of the Warg Pen. So there are only 2 regions that either you start with or that are close by which have the Warg resource. So these are quite limited in terms of the regions where you can recruit them, especially in the early game. But these are a brilliant cavalry unit. They have the +2 hit points, which makes them extra tanky, especially when you consider that they have a defense of 25. The melee attack of 7 is also probably slightly above average for a cavalry unit, and the charge of 3 is also standard. So overall, these are just an excellent cavalry unit. The unit size actually is a bit on the lower end for cavalry. Usually that ranges from about 30 to 80. But overall, a fantastic unit. Then we have the Warg Riders, which are essentially the cavalry equivalent for the evil factions. The strength of the Warg Riders comes from their high unit size of 100. Most cavalry units range from about 30 to 80. They also have a solid melee attack of 6 and an armor-piercing primary weapon, which gives them a lot of offensive power. Additionally, they do have a combat bonus against horses, which makes them quite effective cavalry killers. Their defense is definitely on the lower end though, and they won't last that long in fights. Lastly, we have 2 troll units, which you can get from some of the mountainous regions. The stats for both these units are quite similar. They just have a small difference in hit points, attack, and defense. But overall, the trolls are incredibly powerful. If you can avoid archer fire and just get them to run through enemy lines, they will pick up hundreds of kills, and they are an invaluable asset when going up against stronger factions like the elves and dwarves. They are very costly and they take a long time to recruit, but the investment is well worth it because of the actual performance. So there's not too much to say on the trolls. They are incredibly powerful units and definitely ones that you want to take advantage of as you move through your campaigns. That's how the mountain trolls look there. The last unit I wanted to cover is the generic General's Bodyguard for Gundabad, which is the Orc Champions. Now obviously the Orc and Goblin units are quite weak overall. Their power comes from the sheer number. The power level of this unit in terms of its raw stats is probably similar to a mid-tier unit from a faction like Gondor. And additionally, they don't have the plus hit points that a lot of general units have. But they're still strong enough that if you can get multiple generals into an army, they will be able to hold the line, and you can get most of your kills with the monsters and Black Númenóreans. So overall, I would say it is a decent general unit without being anything special. So that's going to be it for this one. I hope you enjoyed the faction guide and overview for Gundabad, and I will see you on the next one.